What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Friday, April 10th edition of the Ship My Money Show, trying for the second time. I think my mic is working now, just weird glitch on the first attempt. But we have an 11-game MLB slate tonight. Going to go through game by game on DraftKings, as always, using the Run the Sims projections that are on the screen. You can sign up for Run the Sims. Link is in the description below. Regular price for our projections, fully detailed, $100 a month, but you can get 20% off using the promo code RTSMLB26 that you see at the bottom of the screen. Mike said, yes, we sadly hear you now. I feel you. I would prefer to just look at me with no sound also. Really weird. They're not, kind of weird, like 11-game slate. From a strategy standpoint, I don't think it's really that interesting. Like when you had the 2 3-game slates yesterday, you could kind of talk about a lot of different strategy angles and all of that. But like right now, at least, there are 3 players on the entire slate projected for more than 20% ownership. Tyler Glasnow is the only player projected for more than 30% ownership. The highest implied run total on the slate is the Dodgers at like between 5 and 5.5. There's nobody below 3.5. So you just have like 22 teams that look similar to each other. You have a ton of pitchers that look very similar to each other. So it's very much, I think, whoever, like if there's a team you want to get to, they're probably a good play. If there's players you want to play, they're probably fine. You're going to get a ton of players that are just like 5 to 18% owned. So going to go game by game talking about what I think looks the best and all of that, but it's not going to be it's not the best slate for like caring what my player exposures are. Right now, they're super, super flat, which doesn't really surprise me given how similar everybody looks. But really, really just kind of flat, play whatever you think you like kind of slate where you don't have, Coors Field. You don't have 1 or 2 teams at 6 runs. You don't have some pitcher projected for 25 fantasy points, getting a ton of ownership. It's really, really just wide open, I think. So starting things off with the Twins facing the Blue Jays in Toronto. Patrick Corbin returning to the major leagues for the Blue Jays. I thought that we were finally done with him, but then the Blue Jays had a bunch of starting pitcher injuries, and now we get Patrick Corbin back. He made 1 start in the minor leagues to ramp up. He faced 20 batters. He went 5 innings. We have him projected to face about 20 batters today as well. It is a good strikeout matchup for him. The Twins' active roster against left-handed pitching last season had Fangraphs is really slow to load so far this year. Minnesota had a top 10, I believe, strikeout percentage against left-handed pitching. I'm still trying to get Fangraphs to cooperate. Active roster since the start of last season against left-handed pitching. Minnesota actually is middle of the pack. I'm sorry. 22% strikeout percentage against left-handed pitching. Overall, so far this season, the Twins are striking out at the 9th highest rate overall. Corbin, I've said it in the past, like he's not a good pitcher at this stage of his career. I don't think he's quite as bad as people make him out to be because he signed the really big contract and then just, didn't live up to it at all. He's not good, but I don't think he's like absolutely horrible. That said, on this slate, I think there's just enough pitching that you don't really have to pay too much attention to Corbin. He's in 3% of my lineups right now. He's projected for 5% ownership. He's cheap on a slate where obviously there are plenty of bats to pay for, but I don't think that there's any reason to get too excited about Corbin when there's 21 other pitchers on the slate. Similarly, on the other side, Simeon Woods Richardson getting 1% ownership. I have 1% of him as well at 7,300. The matchup against Toronto is not ideal from a strikeout standpoint. Not having Alejandro Kirk does make them strike out a bit more. Woods Richardson, 22% strikeout percentage since the start of last season, 4.68 xFIP. There's just more favorable options to get to on the mound on this slate. For the Twins bats, certainly not a bad matchup for them going up against Corbin. Byron Buxton getting 8% ownership, Luke Keyshaw getting 9%. Those are the 2 highest on the slate. They're my 2 highest owned as well. I have 9% of each of them. I have 5% Ryan Jeffers, who gives you some power. Corbin last season against right-handed hitters allowed a 183 expected ISO, 19.5% strikeout percentage. So again, like not a total gas can, but still certainly not good. Since the start of 2024 against left-handed pitching, Byron Buxton, 272 expected ISO. Luke Keeshaw's had less than 100 plate appearances. Hasn't done shit against lefties, interestingly enough, but again, less than 100 plate appearances. 151 expected ISO for Jeffers. That's actually lower than I expected. Caratini has a 206 expected ISO. That is higher than I expected. But there's, Royce Lewis, 176 expected ISO. There's not a ton to love from Minnesota here, but you are getting them in the Rogers Center, good place for hitting home runs. You are getting them against the 2026 version of Patrick Corbin. So who knows what that even is? Maybe he is actually really bad now, even though he hasn't been, absolutely horrible like last year. So there is upside here. 4.5 total for the Twins makes them look very, very similar to a ton of other teams on the slate. I think Keyshaw, Buxton, Jeffers are the best options here. They're the guys that I'm getting to the most. Jenna said, with the ownership so flat, does it make it harder to find leverage spots? Yeah, it's kind of like that. That's kind of what I was trying to get at before. Like it's, I think, a lot more of you can just, if you see a spot you like, you can probably play it. Like ownership isn't really going to matter that much. Whereas when you get the shorter slates, you get the 5-6 game slates, then it's like, oh, well, I really like the Dodgers, but so does everybody else. And I think that I can make more money by just hoping that they fail, even though I really like them. On a slate of this size with such flat ownership, you can kind of just say, okay, yeah, I really like the Dodgers. I'm going to play the Dodgers. I really like the Blue Jays. I'm going to play the Blue Jays. I think you can kind of just pick and choose whatever spots you actually want to play, which in some ways makes slates like this, I think, more fun. It takes some of the like game theory strategy kind of stuff out of it that I think is fun, but it's also fun sometimes to just be able to say like, yeah, okay, I'm going to click Shohei Ohtani and I'm going to click Freddie Freeman. And like, I'm not going to worry about the fact that they're 40% owned because they're not. So it kind of, has its pros and cons. Blue Jays bats on the other side here against Woods Richardson, 10% ownership coming into George Springer, 5-ish% coming into like the entire rest of the team. They have about a 5-run total here against Woods Richardson. Again, a good home run hitters park here. Reasonable pricing on the Jays for the most part. $5K on Springer, $5,500 on Guerrero. Those are certainly warranted. And then beyond that, they're not really that expensive. Some reverse splits as far as power numbers go for Simeon Woods Richardson last year. 214 expected ISO allowed to righties, only 159 to lefties. He did strike righties out at a higher clip, 24% to 20%, but you have guys on the Blue Jays that are good at putting the ball in play. You do have a lot of right-handed power. Again, that's pointing you toward like Springer and Guerrero as far as right-handed power bats go. Springer, 224 expected ISO since the start of 2024 against right-handed pitching. Guerrero, 223. You do have left-handed power here as well with guys like Jesus Sanchez, 219 expected ISO. If he's in the lineup, Dalton Varsho, 192. But again, Woods Richardson does or did last season at least, do a better job of limiting power to lefties than righties, limiting production overall. Only a 287 expected WOBA against left-handed hitters compared to 323 against righties. I think his splitter, changeup, whatever you want to call it, is probably the reason why he threw it 15% of the time to lefties. He only threw it 8% of the time to righties. That is generally a pitch that if it's good, it plays well against opposite-handed hitters. So I'm guessing that is in large part why he had those reverse splits in terms of production. 174 expected WOBA on the pitch against lefties. So there is like at least a reason to explain it. Yankees are taking on the Rays in Tampa Bay. Reminder, they are back at Tropicana Field now, so you do not have the minor league park that you did last year that was very home run friendly. Steven Matz is on the mound for the Rays. Luis Gil is going for the Yankees. My exposures here look like they might be a little bit weird. Like maybe they end up changing, maybe they don't. I'm getting to 13% Steven Matz right now at 3% owned at 7,500. I don't particularly like that. I hope it goes away. Like the matchup obviously isn't good. The park is good, but you have a near 5-run total for the Yankees. I don't love getting the Steven Matz, but he is 2% owned. Luis Gil on the other side, we only have projected to face about 20 batters here at 7,500. That's not getting him into lineups. I'm going to pull up his Fangraphs page if Fangraphs will cooperate in a reasonable amount of time just to double check what he's been doing because he is coming back from injury. I don't remember if it was Tommy John or what he had last year, but he only made 11 starts last season through 57 innings. He hasn't pitched in the majors yet this year. He made one start, went 4 2/3 at AAA in a rehab start. So I expect him to be, at least relatively limited here. I think that 20 batter projection is probably a pretty solid one. And on an 11-game slate where you're just not expecting him to work that deep into the game, I don't think that I need to get there. But the Steven Matz part is, he sometimes is good. Like as a starter since last season, he actually has a 27% strikeout percentage. He hasn't, generally been that good overall. So yeah, like ideally, I think I just find other pitching to get to, but at very little ownership, he does have a decent projection here. Last year, he only made 2 starts, and this year he's made 2 starts. So that's why that number was high, but he still projects as like a 22% K guy. Like he's kind of just the epitome of just the guy. The last year that he was like regularly a starter, he made 7 starts in 2024 out of 12 appearances. He made 17 starts in 2023 out of 25 appearances. He had a 3.92 xFIP, 3.75 FIP in that 2023 season. Then he was not very good in 2024 in those 12 games, 4.59 expected ERA. That basically got him moved to the bullpen last year. But then now he's back starting. He's starting 11 innings so far this year, 3.47 expected ERA. So, on the one hand, like, yeah, maybe he's just back to being a solid enough pitcher, and he's 7,500, not getting much ownership. On the other hand, he is facing the Yankees, obviously going to have his work cut out for him. Would not be upset at all if I run this stuff later in the day and I'm back down to like 5% Steven Matz or something like that. I don't have any real reason to like give him a big endorsement here other than saying like, oh, wow, he's showing up for me more than I thought he would. For the Yankees bats, Aaron Judge, the only one getting double-digit ownership at 10%. Everybody else right around 5%. That's kind of going to be the theme of like the entire slate when you talk ownership. The big name bat or two on the team is going to get like 10%, and then everybody else is going to get 5%. And it's the same thing here. I have 14% Judge. I have 5% or less of everybody else on the Yankees. Matz has allowed a 181 expected ISO to righties since last year. Keep in mind that was predominantly out of the bullpen, so you could make the case that you would expect him to give up a bit more power as a starter, facing guys more than once through the order. You obviously have a lot of right-handed power here on the Yankees. Not big strikeout numbers against either side of the plate. 21% against righties, 17.5 against lefties. Did do a better job limiting power against lefties. Did have a sub 300 expected WOBA against both sides of the plate, though. So again, like generally not a bad pitcher, just not a great DFS pitcher either. You do have right-handed power here since 2024. Goldschmidt with a 223 expected ISO against lefties. Judge with a ridiculous 445. Stanton's at 212, and knock on wood, healthy so far this year. Grichuk's at 214. I think he struck out like 6 times against Jeffrey Springs yesterday, but you certainly have right-handed power for the Yankees. Aaron Judge, as always, the priority. Warmburner said, in the Minnesota game, will the pitchers be affected by delay when Royce Lewis rolls around on the ground for an hour? Yeah, that was weird yesterday. I thought for sure he was coming out of the game. And then when he hit the infield single, I thought for sure they were going to like pan back to him, like rolling like on the first baseline or something. But then he just got down there perfectly fine. So haven't seen anything else about that. It was definitely weird though. Like non-contact knee injury for Royce Lewis on a swing is not generally what you want to see. Tampa Bay on the other side against Heel, kind of a weird spot for them. Like you're not in a great park for hitting. You're facing a pitcher in Heel who there is volatility in that, he's coming back from injury. Who knows kind of what he looks like, what he has, how rusty he's going to be, whatever. So there is like that upside there, but he is a good pitcher historically. You're in Tropicana Field. You do have mostly an inexpensive Rays lineup. 8% ownership coming into Taylor Walls right now. I think that just kind of goes away by the time we get to lock. He's 2K flat, which is probably what is like pushing him into some lineups right now. I have 4% of him, but once you're gonna have 22 lineups come out where you just have unexpected value near the top tops of orders, you're probably not going to actually need to play much, if any, Taylor Walls at all. Jake Fraley in 5% of my lineups, along with Yandy Diaz. Caminero's in 7%. Kind of just, if you're going to go to the Rays, I think predominantly go to the middle of the order, go to the guys that have the most power. Yandy Diaz obviously off to a very nice start so far this season. We know Caminero's got huge power. Chandler Simpson has big-time stolen base upside at 3,900 if you wanted another bat from Tampa Bay. But another just kind of not particularly interesting stack, given the park and the fact that he probably is pretty good. A's taking on the Mets in New York. Clay Holmes, $9,000 price tag, pitching for the Mets. JT Ginn, $6,300 price tag, pitching for the A's. Ginn worked in relief in his most recent appearance. He faced, I think it was the Astros late in a game, I want to say not even 5 days ago, I didn't think. So I am pulling up his game log now, maybe, just to try and double check that. But I don't think he's going to go super deep into this game. We only have him projected to face 16.5 hitters. So on the one hand, he is really cheap at 6,300, but I'm not anticipating him working that deep into the game. I don't have any of him right now. He is generally somebody that is good against righties and struggles against lefties, going from memory. But yeah, 29.5% strikeout percentage against righties last year, only 19% against lefties. So really big splits there. 125 expected ISO allowed to righties, 263 expected WOBA. Really, really good numbers against righties. Lefties, 194 expected ISO, 344 expected WOBA. Struggles with left-handed bats. Not exactly what you want, I don't think, when you're facing the Mets. Now, granted, you don't have to deal with Juan Soto because he's on the injured list. But assuming Lindor's in the lineup, that's left-handed power. Brett Beatty's a lefty. Other than that, I guess it does drop off with no Soto. Bichette's a righty. Luis Roberts a righty. Vientos is a righty. All that stuff plays to JT Ginn's strengths. But again, I don't think he's going to go deep enough into this game that I really want to mess with him on an 11-game slate. It does create kind of a weird spot for the Mets, but I'll get to that in a minute. Clay Holmes, $9K price tag. Good strikeout matchup here against the A's. They do have power in their lineup. There's no doubt about that. We've kind of seen this similar version of the A's for the last few seasons. And certainly they're getting better. They're getting more young talent promoted to the major league level. But still, 28.9% strikeout percentage so far this season is the second highest in baseball, behind only the Angels. They haven't done much production-wise so far this year, only an 88 WRC plus. That's not to say that they're going to be a bad offense all season. I don't think that they will. Nick Kurtz, Shea Langoliers, Tyler Soderstrom, all legit power hitters. Lawrence Butler has power. Jacob Wilson just puts everything in play. Max Muncy strikes out a lot, but maybe ends up turning into a good hitter this year. The bottom of the order is kind of ass. Jeff McNeil, Denzel Clark, who's in there for defense, Carlos Cortez, but certainly power in this lineup. It's not a lineup where, if you have your B stuff or your C stuff, you're not going to be able to go out there and just carve your way through this lineup. It's not 2025 Colorado or something like that. There are dangerous hitters here, but those guys do all strike out a lot as well, with the exception of Jacob Wilson. So it is a good strikeout matchup for Holmes. He made the transition to the starting rotation last year with the Mets and did a pretty good job. Strikeout percentage isn't elite, especially for a 9K pitcher. Only an 18% strikeout percentage since last year, 4.24 xFIP. But it is a good strikeout spot. It is a good match, a good pitcher's park rather. So I think Holmes is fine. I'm getting 12%. He's projected for 10% ownership. I don't feel like he's under-owned. I don't think he's over-owned. He's just, sure, he's in 10% of my lineups. He's probably going to have a pretty good game against the A's, but he's not a dominant pitcher for a 9K price tag. Very healthy price tag for a guy with a sub 20% strikeout percentage. Now, moving on to the bats. On the A's side, you do get some leverage here against Holmes. Again, it's not the same level of negative correlation that you can get on shorter slates where maybe Holmes would be getting 30% ownership, but he is going to probably get double-digit ownership here. And you do have power in the A's lineup and very, very little ownership here. I'm not going crazy with them, but I am over the field on the A's. I have 9% Shea Langoliers at 2% owned. I have 7% of Kurtz, 5 of Butler and Soderstrom. I have 7 Clark right now, but again, that's probably just sort of early in the day bullshit placeholder value. But the Langoliers, Kurtz, Butler, Soderstrom pieces, I'm perfectly fine just being at like 5 to 10%. Puts me, 2-3x the field. If the A's suck, I'm not like losing all my money or anything like that. But it's a lot of unowned power. And the one thing that is nice kind of when you get these high strikeout, high K teams is like if Clay Holmes is on top of his game, they're probably just going to strike out a lot and not really do much. But that's kind of the case for like every team, especially in 2026. Like pitching is so good. If you get a starting pitcher that just has their like good stuff, you're just not going to do much against them. They're too good. But with a team like the A's, if Holmes does have that like, C+ stuff, you just have like guy after guy after guy that can really take advantage and hit the ball hard when they do make contact. So I do kind of like that aspect of it where they're one of those stacks where like they're not necessarily going to succeed a ton in terms of chances of success, but when they do, it's extra base hits, it's home runs, it's stolen bases, as opposed to like anybody that played the early MLB slate yesterday, or the night slate yesterday, where like Arizona ended up scoring 7 runs or whatever it was, but it was just like single, double, infield single, fielder's choice, sac fly. Like even if you had the 2% owned Arizona stack, you just like didn't really do anything because they all scored 10 points. The A's are one of those teams where when they score 7 runs, there's a very high probability that you have multiple guys with like, 14, 15, 16 fantasy points because of how much power they hit for and the fact that they will steal bases as well. On the Mets side against JT Ginn, I mentioned the splits that he has, 7% ownership coming in to Francisco Lindor is the high mark. 5% or less to pretty much everyone else. I like Lindor the most. Like he's the best left-handed hitter in the lineup. You do prefer lefties against JT Ginn as well. He's a switch hitter, so like he'll have the platoon advantage against anybody, but against Ginn, he'll hit left-handed. The A's bullpen also only has one lefty in it, and he's probably unavailable today because Hogan Harris pitched each of the last 2 days. So you probably have no lefties available for the Mets. That really only matters, I think, for Brett Baty probably. You can see here only a 3% pinch hit probability on Baty. Jared Young, if he's in the lineup as well, this actually should be coming down, I think. Jared Young probably should not have a 32% pinch hit probability because they don't have any lefties. But the 3 lefties in here, it is good for them that the A's don't have any lefties. Lindor is obviously, the best left-handed hitter here, though. So I like getting there. You can play Robert, Bichette, Polanco as well. But Lindor stands out as my favorite target. He's in 9% of my lineups. Frank said, on a day where team projections are all similar, do you still need a stack in your lineup? Yeah, because the idea of stacking it's not that you're not like trying to think about median projections there. The idea of stacking is that you want to need fewer things to go your way. And in baseball, you're not trying to build like the optimal lineup. The optimal lineup very often is not stacked, but it's also just like impossible to hit on. What you're trying to do with stacking is basically say, if Francisco Lindor has a good game, it increases the chances that Luis Robert, Bo Bichette, Brett Baty also have good games because it means Lindor was on base. It means that maybe the opposing pitcher just didn't have his best stuff and the Mets offense as a whole did well. You're basically saying like, if I know that these 2 players that I'm playing have a good game, then the projection for like these other 3 players on his team would actually be higher if I knew for a fact he had a good game. So you still want to stack because it is going to make your lineup correlate more and make it so that you just have to get less things right. If that makes sense. Kind of like I was saying with the A's, like where they're not going to succeed all that often. But if you tell me that Shea Langoliers has a home run and a double, and you tell me that Lawrence Butler has a home run, and I know those things for a fact, it makes it more likely that Clay Holmes just didn't have a good game. And so I also, at that point, knowing that information, would want Nick Kurtz and Tyler Soderstrom, et cetera. So it's still just trying to basically make your life easier in terms of what you need to get right in order to have quality lineups. Guardians taking on the Braves in Atlanta. 4 to 4.5 total for the Guardians, about a 4.5 total for the Braves as well. Bryce Elder pitching for Atlanta at $8,000, getting 4% ownership. Slade Ciccone going for the Guardians at $8,300, getting 2% ownership. Yeah, not a great spot for either guy. Neither guy super exciting. I do have 11% Bryce Elder right now, so I am like 2x the field there. I'm fine with it. Like, he's good enough. He's just this. So many pitchers on this slate are just like just the guy types. 20% strikeout percentage for Elder since last year. 3.91 xFIP. The matchup with the Guardians isn't ideal. Like, Steven Kwan doesn't strike out. Jose Ramirez doesn't strike out. The Guardians' active roster against right-handed pitching since the start of last season ranks 19th in strikeout percentage. So far this season overall, they are 16th in strikeout percentage. It's just like a completely mediocre matchup. Elder, I think, is a better real-life pitcher than DFS pitcher, but only 5% owned, certainly capable of going out there giving you 6-7, scoreless innings, scoring 20-something fantasy points. So I'm 2x the field, but again, not making or breaking my night. I have 1% Ciccone. He's projected for 2% ownership at 8,300. Scary matchup against the Braves. There are some strikeouts in that lineup. He, since last season, has struck out 20% of hitters, 4.11 xFIP, just kind of a carbon copy of so many other guys on this slate. But he is relatively expensive at 8,300. So I don't love either pitcher here, but I do expect that I'll probably have more of Elder than I do Ciccone. For the Guardians bats against Ciccone, Jose Ramirez getting 8% ownership. Everybody else, 5% or less. I have 11% Ramirez. I have 8% Kwan, 7% DeLauder. Left-handed power looks like it's showing up for me here. And I mean, coincidentally, that's just the best hitters on Cleveland anyway. Elder they're going against Elder, not against Ciccone, obviously. Elder, 169 expected ISO against lefties since last year, 178 to righties. Doesn't get blown up by either side of the plate. He's not like elite against either side of the plate. I think generally that just kind of points you towards like getting to the best hitters if you're going to go to Cleveland. Matchup agnostic. Since last season against right-handed pitching, 113 expected ISO for Kwan, but does occasionally hit for power, steals bases here and there. Chase DeLauder has been very good in his limited time in the majors. Ramirez, we know, gives you stolen base upside and power upside. Kyle Manzardo's got big-time power, 209 expected ISO against right-handed pitching since last year. He is cheap, but he is also a first baseman, and there's just no shortage of good first base options. He does also generally have some pinch hit risk, I believe, and the Braves bullpen does have 3 left-handed pitchers in it, so relatively high pinch hit percentage on Manzardo. Braves going against Ciccone, 5 to 7% ownership on like everybody, which is where I'm at as well. Ronald Acuna is in 7% of my lineups, 6% to Baldwin, Riley, 4% to Albies. It's a good offense. It's a high upside offense, reasonably priced for the most part. Ciccone, as I mentioned before, just another middle of the pack pitcher since last season against left-handed hitters, has allowed a 228 expected ISO, does also have a 23% strikeout percentage. His K percentage against lefties is 6 points higher than against righties. He's allowed an expected ISO above 200 to both sides of the plate. So I think this is just sort of another spot where if you're going to play the Braves, just play the best Braves hitters. I don't think you need to be like singling out like, oh, I really want the righties or I really want the lefties or whatever. Just play the guys that fit into your lineups, whether it is positionally or salary-wise or whatever. 296 expected ISO against righties for Acuna since last year, 234 for Baldwin, 272 for Olsen, 227 rather for Riley, 187 for Yastrzemski, 119 for Albies, who fell off the face of the earth after signing his extension. But Michael Harris, 203. Like, there's a lot of power here. There's a lot of stolen base upside here. If this were a shorter slate, I think the Braves would be like really interesting. But with it being an 11-game slate, I think the Braves are just kind of like another, if I'm playing 150 lineups, I'm going to want some of the Braves. If I'm playing like one lineup, I could play the Braves, or I could choose one of like 10 other teams. If I'm playing 3 lineups, maybe I play the Braves, maybe I don't. I don't think they like jump off the page, but they're still the Braves at low ownership in a solid enough spot. Very similar to so many other teams. San Francisco in Baltimore. It is warm in Baltimore today. It's supposed to be like 70 degrees. As an aside, it's supposed to be like 90 fucking degrees next week. So I'm not sure if they're home or not, but the ball will be flying if they are. But today it's like mid 70s. Warm weather. Shane Baz pitching for the Orioles. Landon Rupp on the mound for the Giants. Landon Rupp coming in at 7,800. Shane Baz coming in at 8,400. They're both getting 10 to 15% ownership, which is where mostly I'm at as well. I have 20% Landon Rupp. I have 15% Baz. Landon Rupp actually right now is my highest owned pitcher at 19%. That is not like he's running away from all the other pitchers, obviously. It easily could be like 12% or something by lock, but it was kind of interesting to me that he showed up at the top. I do think he's a good pitcher. It is a park downgrade for him, just like pretty much everything is when you get out of San Francisco. But we did see some good stuff from him last year. 22% strikeout percentage, 3.9 xFIP, right-handed hitters against him. Last season, only a 134 expected ISO with a 24% K percentage. Lefties did have a lower strikeout percentage at 20.5%. Expected ISO jumped a little bit to 165. And Camden Yards is more home run friendly for lefties than righties. So that's not ideal for him. And you do have, left-handed power in this Orioles lineup with Gunnar Henderson, with Adley, in particular, Samuel Basallo supposedly. But you do also have plenty of strikeouts here. Like, this Orioles team, I think when it's at its best, will be a very good power hitting offense, but they haven't really hit for much power yet this year. Gunnar Henderson is hitting for power. Taylor Ward is hitting a bunch of doubles. Adley's been hitting well, but like Pete Alonso is slumping out of the gate. Samuel Basallo has not looked like a major league hitter since coming up last season. I assume that will change sooner than later, but like right now he is pretty consistently like the 5 hitter on this team and has like a 70 something WRC plus for his career. Dylan Beavers, good at getting on base. He showed that ability last year, but still a work in progress. Colton Cowser is not good at hitting. The league has just simply figured him out. Landon Rupp threw his changeup 23% of the time to left-handed hitters last season. He had a 15% swinging strike percentage on it. He allowed a 173 WOBA. I would expect that he throws a changeup to Colton Cowser on like literally every pitch that Colton Cowser is at the plate if Colton Cowser is in the lineup. Colton Cowser cannot hit a changeup flat out, period. So, you have that. Blaze Alexander has been solid so far this year, but like he's not actually a great hitter. Kobe Mayo is in that same bucket with Samuel Basallo, where he's had some decent at bats. He's working walks, but he really hasn't been that good of a hitter outside of like a 1 month stretch last season. He strikes out. So this is like, it's a dangerous lineup, but there are strikeouts here. Even Gunnar strikes out. Pete Alonso strikes out. So like Taylor Ward strikes out. There are strikeouts in this lineup. It's a dangerous lineup, but it's also a lineup that has young hitters that haven't necessarily put it all together either. And it really does give you upside against them. Then you factor in that Landon Rupp is also only $7,800. So it's scary. And I haven't looked to see like if I'm getting to Orioles bats. It's a perfect spot where even if I were playing like 3 lineups, I could see saying like, oh, okay, I'm going to play Landon Rupp in these 2 and I'm going to play the Orioles in this 1 or something. Because it is, I think, a very big boom or bust spot on both sides. Shane Baz on the other side, I love him. I love his stuff. Like, I was so excited the Orioles got him this year. His command through his first 2 starts has been garbage. He has like an 89 pitching plus grade, but his stuff has still been good. 104 stuff plus. Last year it was 105. Good strikeout stuff. Should be able to get some strikeouts, keep the ball on the ground, hopefully. Just a matter of, working ahead in counts and setting up his knuckle curve, which has been very, very good. I like him at that $8,400 price tag. I'm right in line with the field at 15% ownership. So far this season, the Giants rank 17th in strikeout percentage overall. The Orioles rank 7th. Orioles have a 109 WRC plus. Giants have a 78 WRC plus. So that kind of illustrates what I was just saying, where like you do probably have fewer strikeouts in the Giants lineup, especially because you have Luis Ariz in there, striking out 6% of the time. But also, and not to say the Giants don't have good hitters, because they do, but the Orioles have the, I think, more dangerous lineup. But they also have the one where if Landon Rupp strikes out 10 guys in 6 innings, you're not really going to be that shocked. So interested in the pitching here, even though it is scary. Again, good hitting conditions in Baltimore as far as the weather goes as well. For the Giants bats against Shane Baz, sound like a broken record, but getting 5 to 10% ownership across the board, which again, I think is just like sort of where it should be. 9%. That is not a Giant. Willy Adames getting 8%, 7% to Chapman and Arise. I have 9% Arise, 7 on Chapman and Adames, 5 on Devers. It's just another like middle of the road, mid fours implied run total team. Shane Baz, 165 expected ISO to lefties since last year, 134 to righties. He gave up the home runs last year in part because of where he was pitching. So now, you do have Camden Yards, which downplays right-handed power compared to Steinbrenner Field in Tampa Bay, where Baz kind of got victimized last year. And again, I think Baz is a very good pitcher. The Orioles bullpen, too, they've actually been solid so far this season, but they are kind of a polarized bullpen, I think, where if you get like the good 5-6 inning start from Shane Baz, and you can turn it over to like the back end of the Orioles bullpen, where you have Tyler Wells, you have Anthony Nunez, you have Helsley as your closer, you have Grant Wolfram for lefties. Like that part of the bullpen is good. If you can get to Shane Baz early, I think you get to some weaker arms that you can add on runs against, and you won't have to face, the Ryan Helsley, Anthony Nunez at the back end. So I do think that it's still a bullpen that gives you some add-on value potential or add-on run potential, even though the back end is pretty good. Rico Garcia as well, pitching well to start the season. But it is kind of, it is a team I think you can still add on against if you get to Shane Baz early. So that is kind of an appealing stacking point as well. On the other side, for the Orioles against Landon Rupp, 9% ownership to Gunnar, 7% to Adley, 6 to Basayo. Still can't roster them together. Hopefully DraftKings gives one or both of them first base eligibility sooner than later, just to make things more fun. But I have 9% Gunnar, 7% on Ward, 5% on Adley, goes down from there. Wouldn't be upset if I got more of them, especially if I'm going to play a good amount of Rupp, just to kind of have both of those potential, boom outcomes. But again, 4.5 run total. Tough matchup. Like Landon Rupp's a pretty good pitcher. Best Ball Noah said, from a purely EV perspective, would you skip or play less volume on slates like this where everyone grades out evenly and all your stuff is flat? Probably not. I mean, I actually don't know the answer on like how I've done historically on slates like this versus like, slates where everybody's playing one team. I think generally it probably still comes out pretty even, because like the slates where somebody's like, where everybody's, 30% of the field's playing the Dodgers in cores, they're playing them because they're that much better than every other option. So like you get the game theory angle where you can leverage against that and kind of create paths to winning when the unexpected things happen. But at the same time, like, the expected thing is going to happen a lot, and you're just going to get your ass kicked because the Dodgers score 15 runs. So like I would think it probably comes out pretty close to even. I don't actually know. I don't really trust post-contest MLB sims in general, so that doesn't help either in terms of answering that question. If you trust those, everybody should just not play MLB DFS and come back for NFL and NBA in the fall. So I don't really totally buy into those either, but it's a good question. My intuition is that it probably kind of works itself out to be pretty close to even. But at the same time, like, it is harder for your opponents to make mistakes when literally probably 20 offenses are like good plays today, and 15 pitchers are good plays. So for me personally, like, I'm just gonna play it, and I don't really change my volume or what I'm playing based on slate size too much. But I think it's a good question. I don't know the answer. I think this is also like, it's not even like, 11 game slates, EV goes down. It's like, this is like the most flat slate probably maybe that you'll see all year. Like, at least because like you'll get into the summer where you're going to at least have one or two games where it's, 90 in Baltimore and both teams have a 5.5 total, or St. Louis or something like that, or you'll have a Coors game. Like, this is just straight, everybody looks the same. So if you were going to have a slate where it's just like, yeah, I don't even know what the edge is today, it would be one that looks like this, I guess. But yeah, good question. I don't actually know the answer. Washington taking on Milwaukee. In Milwaukee, about a 5-run total for the Brewers, about 3.5 to 4 for the Nats. Milwaukee going with Chad Patrick at $8,200, getting 10% ownership. Jake Irvin going for the Nats, $6K, getting 5% ownership. I did want to look. I don't remember where I put this leaderboard. Jake Irvin was one of the guys in spring training that I saw a lot of good things about, and he was raving about the Nationals' new coaching staff and the tools that they've given their pitchers compared to what they had in the past. It reminded me a lot of when the Orioles switched over to their current front office. You had pitchers just being like, holy shit, like they're giving me so much information and so much data that, I didn't know, and that is going to make me better. Jake Irvin making a lot of the same comments this spring. And then so far this year, again, obviously small sample size applies. Out of every starting pitcher today, Jake Irvin is tied with JT Ginn for third in Stuff Plus. 107 Stuff Plus so far this season for Jake Irvin. Stuff has been very, very good. Now, you still have the high total for Milwaukee, but 5% ownership coming into Irvin. I'm getting to 8% right now. He's only thrown, 9 innings. I don't want to, jump the gun and just like anoint Jake Irvin as some stud pitcher, but there was smoke in spring training about Jake Irvin, and Jake Irvin himself giving you reasons why maybe he'd be better this year. And so far this year, the Stuff has played well. He's, very small sample, still allowed a 275 expected ISO to lefties. He's also struck them out 29% of the time. He has struck righties out 22%. So I still think like targeting against Jake Irvin is perfectly fine here. You don't want to just get away from one of the highest totals on the board because he's shown good stuff in 2 games, but I also don't mind being at, around 2x the field on him. He's cheap. He's going to get a little bit of negative correlation against a Brewers team that should have some ownership. And I had mentioned it before too, but our projections in general will be quick to adjust to guys that are better over a small sample pretty quickly. We still only have him projected for like 11 DraftKings points here. But we do have all of the, newest data on pitching. So like we do have models that adjust very quickly as well when we see improvements from pitchers. So I'm getting 8% Jake Irvin. I'm fine with that. Chad Patrick on the other side getting 10% ownership. I'm getting 12%. $8,200 price tag. Nats have been kind of an annoying offense to take pitchers against so far this season. They've gotten to some, pretty chalky pitchers so far. They have only struck out 20.8% of the time. That's 24th in baseball. They have a 119 WRC plus, which is like really good. Obviously, it's like third, I think. Yeah, third highest. The only teams that have been more productive offensively than the Nats so far are Houston and the Dodgers. You don't expect that to continue, but this is a young developing team where, you have CJ Abrams, who's good. You have James Wood, who's good. Dalen Lyle has shown the ability to hit. You have young talent here. They will come back to earth, but it is at least a reasonably talented team that has been good out of the gate. That being said, Chad Patrick reasonably priced. He struck out 24% of hitters as a starter since last year, 4.11 xFIP. He is one of the many pitchers that project for, 12 to 15 DraftKings points or something like that. On the Nat side against him, I am getting 2x the field on James Wood. I have 11% James Wood. He is getting 5% ownership. Big time power bat, stolen base upside. Questions about, if kind of the league figured him out, maybe he's readjusted and refigured out the league or whatever. Had the really good first half last year, did not have a good second half whatsoever. 167 expected ISO to lefties since last year for Patrick, 23% strikeout percentage. But, just getting to a high upside bat in James Wood looks fine. Other than that, I have 5% of Luis Garcia. I have 5% of Nasim Nunez, and it goes down from there. So not getting to a ton of the Nats overall, although they're not really getting any ownership. So I guess I'm still over the field on most of them. But James Wood in particular is the one showing up in my lineups the most. On the Milwaukee side, Bryce Turang, I believe, is banged up. So we'll need to see if he's actually playing. But he's getting 14% ownership. 10% a piece to Garrett Mitchell, William Contreras, Christian Yelich, not too shy of 10% to Bowers, Hamilton. So this is collectively, I think, one of the higher owned teams, and that's not surprising given that they have a 5-run total. But again, on an 11-game slate, that still just means like a bunch of 8 to 14% owned guys instead of 5 to 8% owned guys. So still low enough ownership where if you want to play the Brewers, it's not going to be that tough for you to just pick whatever Brewers you want and then find a low owned pitcher, find a low owned secondary stack, whatever it may be. I did mention, that Jake Irvin's stuff does look very good so far this season. That being said, since last year, and I mentioned, already giving up a lot of expected power to lefties this year, since last year, 271 expected ISO to lefties, only a 15% strikeout percentage. That has gone up significantly this year. We'll see if that continues. Righties had a 178 expected ISO. So overall, I think still a solid spot for the Brewers. I am a bit below the field. I have 11% Bryce Turang, 8% on Contreras, 7 on Yelich, and then it drops off to like 3% on Bowers. So I am below the field, and I do think there's a reasonable chance that Jake Irvin is a better pitcher than most projections are going to paint him as, but it's still a good park for power. It's still a solid Milwaukee offense overall. I want to check the Nats bullpen also. They have 3 lefties in their bullpen. They should all be available today. The Nats did not play yesterday, so that is a slight negative too. Turang left-handed, Yelich is left-handed, Bowers is left-handed, Hamilton is left-handed, Mitchell is left-handed. You have relatively high pinch hit percentage on Bowers, on Hamilton. Mitchell's only at 7%. I'm surprised that's not a little bit higher. But even if they stay in, you're getting, lefty-lefty matchups probably once Irvin comes out of the game. So that is in addition to Irvin potentially being better than he was last year. You do have 3 lefties available for the Nats to match up with a left-handed heavy Brewers lineup, which is likely to lead to either pinch hitting or just unappealing matchups for those hitters later on in the game, potentially. White Sox taking on Kansas City in a rematch of yesterday's game that was supposed to score a ton of runs and did absolutely nothing. Chris Bubic pitching for the Royals, $8,800 price tag, 27% ownership. Davis Martin, $6,700, getting 3% ownership for the White Sox. I have 1% Davis Martin at $6,700. Don't really think you need him in a not very good strikeout matchup on a slate with 22 pitchers. He is, there he is, 17.8% strikeout percentage, 4.55 xFIP since last year. Chris Bubic as a starter, 24.5% K percentage, 3.68 xFIP. He is getting 27% ownership. I'm getting the 14%. This is just, I think, a slate size thing for me. I don't have any issue with Chris Bubic being one of the highest owned pitchers on the slate. He's a good pitcher. He's facing the White Sox, but I can kind of just take some of his exposure, turn it into other pitchers that look very similar. He projects, a couple points better than a bunch of other guys that are getting a fifth of the ownership. I can just turn it into some more of those guys. And it's kind of what I'm doing with Tyler Glass now later on as well. But I'm getting the 14% Bubic. That's about half the field. I think he's good. I just am kind of, 2X on a lot of pitchers and then under the field on the most popular pitchers right now. Don't even know for sure if that will hold, but it is a strategy that in general I'm perfectly fine with. Bubic has already made 2 starts so far this season. He's gone 11 innings. He has struck out 27% of hitters so far. Last year, he made 20 starts, 116 innings, struck out 24.4% of hitters. Just a solid pitcher in a good matchup here against the White Sox. Not a very good offense. And then on top of that, Murakami is left-handed. Colson Montgomery is left-handed. So the 2 biggest power threats in the White Sox lineup, you do have the platoon advantage. That said, Bubic struck out lefties 21% of the time last year and allowed a 170 expected ISO. Righties struck out 25.5% of the time with a 112 expected ISO. So you did have reverse splits here in terms of both production and strikeout percentage. The White Sox might do Kansas City a favor and just not even play Murakami or Montgomery, but that is kind of something to keep in mind. You're going to get a right-handed heavy lineup from the White Sox most likely, and then their best hitters are left-handed. Bubic was reverse splits. He wasn't bad against lefties. He just wasn't as good as against righties. That's not to say that it's a great spot for Murakami or Montgomery either, but it is a lot of times I think against the White Sox, you're going to be able to just dominate them with good lefties. because the only two of the only guys in their lineup that can actually hit are left-handed. But in this case, like Bubic actually isn't lights out against lefties. For the White Sox offense here against Bubic, another team that's getting basically no ownership, 5% projected ownership coming in to Miguel Vargas at 3,500. Other than that, it's like 3% or less. I have 8% of Murakami and Montgomery, who I was just saying I actually like somewhat, if they're in the lineup. I like them in the sense that if I'm going to the White Sox, I'm not going to skip them just because they're left-handed. I'm not going out of my way to like play them as one-offs or anything, though. Derek Hill, Miguel Vargas, Chase Maidroth, all 6% of my lineup. So technically like 2 to 3x the field on the White Sox. Also not getting above 10% on any individual White Sox bat. For Kansas City on the other side, 4.5 to 5 total here. 12% ownership to Bobby Witt. I'm getting to 11%. 8% to Michael Garcia. I have 7%. 5% or less to everyone else. I also have 5% or less. So pretty even with the field on the Royals bats. Martin, since last year, he did add like a kick change last year that he stole from Hayden Birdsong on the Giants. Just like saw his grip and realized that they had similar arm slots and just started throwing it. But still didn't really put up impressive numbers. 174 expected ISO to righties, 204 to lefties. Strikeout percentage against lefties, 4 points lower than against righties. So it's not like he was getting a ton of swings and misses on that changeup. He threw it 33% of the time to left-handed hitters, only a 9% swinging strike percentage. Didn't give up a lot of power on it, but didn't get a lot of swings and misses. So I think it's an okay spot here for Kansas City. Very similar to, other teams like the Braves or the Giants or the Orioles or the Mets. Boston facing the Cardinals in St. Louis. 3.5 total for the Cardinals is the lowest on the board right now. Not really surprising. They have a tough matchup with Connolly early, and they are not very good. For the Red Sox, they have about a 4.5 total against Dustin May. May, $6,200 price tag. There we go. May, $6,200 price tag, getting 16% ownership. Early, $7,700 price tag, getting 15% ownership. I have 18% of Connolly Early. I have 17% of Dustin May. Connolly Early has looked good. He already was, pretty highly regarded coming into this season. We saw him in a limited sample last year, struck out 32% of hitters in that small sample. But then there was, he's actually in the Saris article that just came out earlier today, talking about guys that look even better than expected early on in the season. No pun intended there. But, in his 4 starts last year, 19 innings pitched, struck out 36% of hitters. He at AAA last year struck out 31% of hitters in 6 starts. He projects as like a 24% K guy with a sub 4 FIP in the majors. And then now you're facing this Cardinals team that just isn't very good. So far this season, the Cardinals are actually 15th in WRC plus, basically league average at 99. They have a 21% strikeout percentage, but they're not expected to actually be a particularly good offense. They don't have many good hitters. And then also JJ Weatherholt, left-handed, Alec Burleson, left-handed. So you have probably a predominantly right-handed lineup, but 2 of your more dangerous hitters are left-handed hitters here for the Cardinals. So that sets up nicely for Connolly Early as well. Jordan Walker has emerged finally, seemingly, as somebody that finally is living up to the hype, at least, through the first couple weeks of the season. But that's still, not going to deter me from getting to Connolly Early here at a good price tag and modest ownership. Dustin May on the other side, he was somebody that I thought maybe there was some talk about him in spring training that he was looking a lot better in terms of stuff so far this year. 99 stuff plus so far. 21% strikeout percentage as a starter going back to last year. 4.5 xFIP. He is cheap though. Don't mind getting to him some at $6,200. I have 16%, which is right in line with the field. So I'm like 15 to 20% on both of these pitchers along with the field. Question in chat. Do you believe in cold streaks? I'm a Yankee fan and I really like Mats against us. We've been awful, and every year we have 3 weeks where we can't hit. Like, yes. So the problem with cold streaks, I'll try and keep it short. Yes, like they're absolutely real. Hitters go into slumps. Sometimes multiple hitters from the same team go into a slump at the same time. but it's impossible really to know if somebody is cold and when they're going to stop being cold. Now we do have more ability to actually like quantify it now because you have bat speed data, you have swing speed, you have attack angle. Like you can actually now kind of like look and say like over a relatively small sample, oh, this guy's bat speed is 3 miles an hour slower than usual. He's probably hurt or not seeing the ball well or something. That still doesn't mean it's not going to correct itself tomorrow. But yes, cold streaks are real. But from a DFS standpoint, it's not enough to say like, oh, I'm going to play Steven Matz today because the Yankees look like shit against Jeffrey Springs yesterday. Coincidentally, I do have a good amount of Steven Matz right now, but that's not the reason why. But yeah, cold streaks definitely real. It's just a matter of they're not the best predictor of future performance because you never really know when they're starting or ending. CJ Reno said Red Sox are terrible this year. Yes, they are. So far, not a good team whatsoever. Still a 4.5 total here for Boston. 6% ownership to Trevor Story, the highest owned guy on the Red Sox against May. Dustin May is always kind of like a tricky guy for me to kind of try and talk about when you're taking hitters against him because he should just be a better pitcher than he is. He throws hard. He's got the sinker. But 209 expected ISO allowed to left-handed hitters since the start of last season. 168 to righties. Strikeout percentage against righties is actually 7.5 points lower than against lefties, which is a respectable 24%. Like you have left-handed power here. You have Roman Anthony. You have Wilyer Abreu. You have Jarren Duran. Those guys can all do damage from the left side. Trevor Story, gives you some stolen base upside and some power upside. So low owned stack that does have some upside here. That being said, though, Roman Anthony, 7% of my lineups is the highest owned guy for me, followed by 5% apiece on Abreu, Duran, and Story. The Cardinals bullpen has 3 left-handed pitchers, and they didn't play yesterday. So that's a little bit of a downgrade for the stack as well because you run into that same problem as the Brewers, where they have a bullpen that can match up. And so you're either going to get guys like Wilyer Abreu being pinch hit for, or you're going to get lefty-lefty matchups that aren't ideal. St. Louis on the other side, I have like 6% Herrera and Weatherholt, 5% Win, and Burleson, 3% Walker. Lowest team total on the slate right now. Connolly Early is very good. But, he'll get 15, 20% ownership, and he is making like his, 7th major league start. If you're going to go to the Cardinals, just primarily go to the guys that are actually solid hitters. Herrera, Weatherholt, Burleson, Walker, Wynn will steal some bases. But overall, not a particularly appealing team. Houston facing the Mariners in Seattle, the worst park for offense in all of baseball. Emerson Hancock is pitching for the Mariners. He is $7,600, getting 3% ownership. For some reason, he is in 14% of my lineups right now. I don't hate it because it's not like a crazy high number. The matchup certainly is not great. It kind of seems like a high projection here, but we'll see. Maybe it'll come down during the day. But I have 14% of him. Imai on the other side getting 6% ownership at 8,700. I have 13% of him as well. Both of these teams have a run total around 4. Again, because the park it suppresses offense very heavily. Actually, if you look some other places, the Astros are at like 3.5. So maybe that's kind of driving Emerson Hancock as well. Since the start of last season, Emerson Hancock has struck out 19% of hitters, 4.39 xFIP. So again, like not a good strikeout pitcher, not a good pitcher overall, but kind of just par for the course for today's slate. Like his numbers actually, he has a higher strikeout percentage since last year than Clay Holmes. He has a slightly worse xFIP than Clay Holmes. Clay Holmes, is in a better matchup facing the A's than the Astros, but similar run totals for both teams. So I kind of get it from like if nobody's going to play this guy, I'll play him and just hope that he gives me 6 scoreless innings in a great park for pitching. But at the same time, like I don't have tons of confidence in Emerson Hancock. I don't love a matchup against Jeremy Pena, Yordan Alvarez, Jose Altuve, Carlos Correa, Christian Walker. Like it's still an offense that is not, it's been very good so far this season. I mentioned it earlier, second highest WRC plus in baseball year to date. The highest, ahead of the Dodgers right now. They've only struck out 19% of the time. It's not a good matchup, but it is a good park to pitch in. Imai on the other side, kind of the same thing. Like, we don't really know exactly what to make of this guy coming over from Japan. He's only made a couple of starts so far, but you do have a Mariners team in Seattle that, will strike out a bit. They have the 4th highest strikeout percentage in baseball so far this season. They haven't hit at all. They have an 81 WRC plus. That will come up. They're likely to be an above average offense, but you have 6% ownership at 8,700. I don't mind getting I'm 2x that right now. I'm perfectly fine with that. He has made 2 starts. He's gone 8 1/3 total. I want to pull up his last start just to see how many batters he faced, if Fangraphs will cooperate. Michael said, are we only allowed to roster Ohtani at pitcher on FanDuel? I haven't played FanDuel this year, but when he's not pitching, you can roster him at hitter. You just can only roster him at pitcher when he's pitching. At least that's how it is on DraftKings, and that's how it's always been on FanDuel. And he's not pitching today. Fangraphs, there we go. Nope, still not doing what I wanted to do. Okay, so maybe if I go to the DraftKings page. Either way, getting to about 13% of Imai here, taking advantage of the park. And again, like, he just projects similarly to, he's a little bit more expensive, but he projects similarly to a lot of pitchers on this slate. I don't mind getting a little bit more than the field if he's only going to be 6% owned or so. For the Astros bats against Hancock, again, the park sucks, but you don't have any ownership coming in really to the Astros right now. 5% to Yordan Alvarez, and then everybody else is below that. So I am, even though I'm over the field on Hancock at 3%, I am over the field on the Astros as well. I have 9% of Yainer Diaz. I have 8% on Alvarez, 6 on Altuve, 5 on Pena. I don't think Emerson Hancock's like a great pitcher. I just think this park sucks for offense. But if there's going to be no ownership to either side here, I'll just be a little bit above the field on both sides. 207 expected ISO allowed to lefties since last year for Hancock. Only 130 to righties. 16% strikeout percentage to righties, 20% to lefties. Like, more often than not, I think Hancock wins out here. Very low team total by Astros standards, especially. The park sucks. But at the same time, that's a lot of talent on Houston that you can get at virtually no ownership. On the Seattle side, kind of the same thing. 5% ownership coming into Cal Raleigh. Nobody else is higher than that. I have 8% Cal Raleigh. I have 5% on Donovan, 4% on Rodriguez. So I do have a little bit more Houston than I do Seattle. I do think that Imai is probably a better pitcher than Hancock, so that makes sense. Rockies facing the Padres in San Diego. Rockies almost won another game yesterday, but then blew it in extras. Walker Buehler is pitching for the Padres. He's 6,900. He's getting 7% ownership. I have 7%. Sagano is going for the Rockies. He's getting no ownership. I have none. I hope Sagano pitches well. He was an Oriole last year. Fun to root for, but don't see any need in the world to roster him here against the Padres, especially when he's $7,000. Like, there's just cheaper pitchers too. Walker Buehler, good matchup for him. Who knows what he is at this point? I mean, this is somebody that dealt with a bunch of injuries going back to his time with the Dodgers. He pitched like shit with the Red Sox, bounced around and ended up on the Padres. But he is facing a Rockies team that is still very likely to be a below average offense, especially outside of Coors Field. They have an 84 WRC plus so far this year. They are 5th in strikeout percentage. Buehler is only 6,900. I have 7%. That's fine. For the bats here, I am getting to the Rockies a bit. 3% projected ownership to Hunter Goodman and Mickey Moniak, along with 4% to Edward Julian, are the highest owned hitters. I have 10% Goodman right now. He is banged up a bit. We'll see if he's in the starting lineup. But he is actually a quality hitter here. And again, there's no real guarantee that Buehler is actually good. 201 expected ISO allowed to right-handed hitters since last year for Walker Buehler. Hunter Goodman has a 200 expected ISO against right-handed pitching. Moniak's at 250. Julian's at 187. Tovar's at 177. Johnston's at 202. There are some flawed power bats in this Rockies lineup. Like, they will strike out a lot, but they do have some power. I'm getting to 10% on Goodman. I'm getting to 7% on Moniak, 6 on Rumfield and Tovar. I have 7% Kyle Karros as a value right now. He probably goes away a bit, but Goodman, Moniak, Rumfield, Tovar, if you get to some Castro, like, I'm fine with all of those guys against Walker Buehler. You do have what is, supposed to be a good Padres bullpen behind Buehler, which is the problem. Obviously, Mason Miller at the back end, but if you get there, you weren't doing well anyway. But they did use 5 relievers yesterday, so there is that. Jeremiah Estrada is probably not available today. He's pitched 2 days in a row. Mason Miller probably not available today. He's pitched 2 days in a row. But again, those are both back end guys where if you got to them, you probably weren't doing well anyway. But they did use 5 relievers, so a little bit more overworked bullpen than usual for the Padres if they can get to Buehler early on in the game. Pretty solid matchup for the Padres on the other side against Sagano. 11% ownership coming into Cronenworth, 9% to Merrill, 8% to Tatis, and then goes down the list from there. I'm getting to 13% Fernando Tatis at 7% owned. That's my highest owned guy from the Padres. I have 7% Machado, 7% Cronenworth, 6 on Merrill. So kind of around the field on those guys, a little bit below the field on Cronenworth, but over the field on Tatis. Sagano is a weird one. Like, he really, really, really needs to be locating to be any good. He doesn't have overpowering stuff. He averages like 92, 93 miles an hour on his fastball. He has a splitter that can be good, but he has to be working ahead in counts to set it up. Righties have a 216 expected ISO against him since last year. Lefties have a 251 expected ISO. There's a lot of power upside here against Sagano. The Rockies bullpen, if you can get into the front end of it, I still, assume that they're not going to be a great bullpen, even though we haven't seen like the true Rockies blow up games out of their bullpen so far this season. They also used 6 relievers yesterday. Back end guy, Victor Vodnik, their closer, may not be available. He threw 32 pitches, but none of the guys that they used yesterday had pitched the day before. That being said, they did have somebody, Zach Agnos, throw 44 pitches the day before. So don't know if he'll be available again today. Might be, but you do have, a Rockies bullpen that used 6 guys yesterday. So if you can get to Sagano early, maybe things will get a little bit ugly there as well. So I do think the Padres look like a pretty good stack. Also a 5-run total, which is one of the higher ones on the slate. And then finally, we have Texas taking on the Dodgers in LA. Reminder, this is a great park for home runs. Obviously, any park the Dodgers are playing in is good for home runs because the Dodgers are hitting, but just good park overall for home runs. Tyler Glasnow pitching for the Dodgers. He's the highest owned player on the slate right now at 48%. Kumar Rocker is pitching for the Rangers. He is not the highest owned guy on the slate at 1%. $7,200 price tag for Rocker. $9,800 for Glasnow. Glasnow is obviously a good option. He's the highest projected pitcher. The matchup with the Rangers is fine. The park is scary, but I wouldn't fault anybody for playing a bunch of Tyler Glasnow. Like, he is clearly a good play, but there are a lot of just solid enough pitching options that are getting like 5 to 15% ownership on this slate that at least right now, my strategy, and this is kind of like one of the only spots where I'm different than the field so far, has been to just spread it out across those pitchers, get like 2 to 3x on the 5 to 10% owned guys. And as a result, I'm only getting the 15% Glasnow. If Glasnow goes out there and puts up a score that I have to have, then I probably won't have a good slate. But it's kind of like I think there's more value to hoping Glasnow just has like a mediocre game at 50% owned. And I now have a bunch of lineups running around that have like 5% owned or 10% owned guys that are beating Glasnow at cheaper price tags. And it allows me to spread out across all these offenses that look very, very similar. So that's the approach I'm taking right now. You kind of saw it with Chris Bubich as well. I'm not suggesting it's the only approach or playing Glasnow or playing Bubich is bad or anything like that. But that's just kind of what is showing up for me right now. My exposures aside, Tyler Glasnow, 29% strikeout percentage since the start of last season, 3.57 xFIP, obviously a very good pitcher. You will run into some frustrating starts, especially on DraftKings, where you do lose points for walks and stuff like that. Glasnow is somebody that at times, the pitch count will get driven up because not only does he have a 29% strikeout percentage, he's walked 11% of hitters. So you will run into that issue from time to time. But very good pitcher overall in a solid enough matchup here. The Rangers rank 12th in strikeout percentage so far this season. They have a 97 WRC plus. There's nothing wrong with Glasnow other than I don't think he's that much better than like the field in general. And he's getting, 4 times the ownership of a lot of guys that are pretty similar. Einsteinium said on slates like this with flat ownership, I think it just makes sense to get more of the best teams. Yeah, pretty much. But the problem with like today specifically is who are even the best teams? Like the Dodgers, obviously, but like Houston's in Seattle. So even though they've been one of the best or the best offense this year, the park sucks. Like there's just so many kind of good pitchers or like not great. The Yankees are in Tropicana. It's kind of, there's just no, like, again, no team on the slate has a run total north of like 5.5. So like, yeah, you can go to the most talented teams, but there's things working against a lot of them as well. Whether it's parks or tough matchups or whatever it may be. Dodgers do have the highest total on the slate. Starting on the Ranger side, I am getting a bit over the field on them. Again, not getting too carried away, but if I'm going to have 15% Glasnow, I may as well expand that stand a little bit and get to some of the bats here too. 5% ownership to Seager is the highest, followed by 4% to Wyatt Langford. I have 12% Jake Berger right now. I have 10% Seager, 7 on Langford, 5 on Nimmo. So again, not getting like super carried away, but it is a park that's good for power. It is an offense that does have some power. The matchup sucks. 107 expected ISO allowed to righties by Glasnow since last year, only 128 to lefties. There's nothing suggesting that like this is a good matchup or anything for the Rangers, but you do have a 205 expected ISO for Langford since last year, 295 for Seager, 214 for Berger. There are power bats in this lineup. Langford gives you stolen base upside as well. So I am over the field on Texas. May as well be when I'm playing 15% of Glasnow. On the other side, Shohei, highest owned hitter on the slate at 24%, but then it drops off. Kyle Tucker at 10%, Will Smith at 9%, Freeman at 8%. I'm under the field right now on the Dodgers. I have 13% Ohtani, so he's still one of my highest owned hitters, but it's less than the field. I have 8% Tucker, 6% Smith. Playing the Dodgers at a pretty similar frequency to how I'm playing a lot of the 4.5 implied run total teams. Their ownership isn't crazy high, but it is a bit higher than those other teams. If everything is flat, would you lean more 3-3-1-1 or 3-3-2? No, I mean, I'm still 5-2 is my most used stack type, followed by 5-3, followed by 4-3, followed by 5-5, followed by 4-2, and 4-4. Like it's still, there's enough teams on the slate where even though all these teams basically, give or take, have implied run totals of like 4.5, there's still 22 teams playing, and there's going to be more than one team almost guaranteed today that scores 10 plus runs. So like I want 5 or 4 of like whichever team that is. Obviously don't know who it's going to be, but just the sheer number of teams makes it likely that there's going to be a couple breakout offensive games today, even though nothing like looks great on paper. If it were like a 3-game slate where everything were flat, then yeah, I start mixing in more of like the 3-3-2 because there's a pretty, if you only have 6 teams playing, there's a relatively high chance that like every game does just end up being like 4-3, 5-4, 3-2, and you actually just need to grab like that individual 2 or 3 hitters from a couple different teams. But with 22 teams playing, there's a very good chance that you do get a couple of just blow up games here, whether it's a starter gets hurt, a bullpen shits the bed late, starter just sucks, like whatever it may be. While there's nothing that really looks great on paper, nothing runs away on paper, there are going to be a couple teams almost guaranteed that do blow up. If you're stacking against Glasnow, should they be full 5 man in case he gets blown up? I don't know if you have to go 5, but like you can go at least like 2 or 3. You could easily grab like a Langford, Seager, Berger, something like that. For me personally right now, I have 19 out of 150 teams that have at least 2 Rangers. 5 of those teams have 5. 1 of those teams has 4. So like 2/3 of my Ranger stacks are mini stacks, not full stacks, which I am perfectly fine with. Like, they're not super expensive and they do have power hitters. So like, you don't even need Glasnow to get blown up. It works out perfectly for me if like Tyler Glasnow scores 15 fantasy points, 16 fantasy points, but like Jake Berger hits a home run and a double, Corey Seager hits a home run, Langford triples and steals a base. That would be a perfectly fine outcome for me and the way that my lineups look. So to recap everything for me right now, again, with the caveat that my exposures almost definitely will change by lock, and also there's a billion different ways to play a slate, so my exposures don't matter that much anyway. My highest owned pitchers right now: Landon Rupp, Connolly Early, Dustin May, Shane Baz, and Glasnow and Bubic. But I am under the field on Glasnow, Bubic. My highest owned pitcher is Rupp at 19%. I'm extremely flat on exposures in general. My highest owned hitters right now are Judge, Tatis, Ohtani, Berger, Witt, James Wood. But again, like my highest owned hitter right now is Aaron Judge at 14%. My highest owned stacks overall, that's, a minimum of 2 players from a team: Dodgers, Padres, Rangers, Athletics, and Rockies. My highest owned 5-mans are the Red Sox, the Guardians, the White Sox, the Twins, and the Cardinals. But again, just super flat everywhere. Maybe some of that changes a little bit once we get lineups. Probably won't. Like, I think that's just my general approach to a slate like this usually. So should be interesting. You can make some fun lineups. You can really just play like whoever you want. It's not that hard. Like if you just want to jam the Dodgers, you can jam the Dodgers and Glasnow if you want. Just, mix in the Rockies and the Nats and some shit like that. Like, it's very easy to find low owned players. So very wide open slate. You can definitely make lineups that feel good as opposed to like, playing the Rockies or something yesterday or the Diamondbacks yesterday. So should be fun. Thanks for checking out the show. ×2, I guess, for anybody that caught the first 30 seconds of my mic not working earlier. I am going to go take a nap or something because I'm fucking exhausted, but have a good weekend. Have fun, stay safe, whatever. Enjoy the Masters. Hope you win some money tonight, and I'll see you back here next week.